I will begin our meeting by asking Councillor Golightly to open our meeting with a karakia.
Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura. He tio, he huka, he hauhu. Tihei Māori ora.
Beautiful. Thank you, Councillor Golightly. Councillors, everybody is present. I'm just going to go through a sort of a few rules of engagement for this style of meeting. Just a reminder that the chat function has been disabled, so everything that will be said will be recorded and seen. When it comes to voting, I'd like us all to use a show of hands. So can I just have a little bit of a practice that everybody just put their hand up to the screens, and if you hold them there, that means that I'll be able to see who's holding their hand up. Simon, can you? Thank you. And Phil, if you can just hold your hand, you need to hold it in front of the camera itself. Phil, yep, that's better. And Nicholas. Thank you. That makes it easier for everybody to see. If there is a division that's called for in any of the voting, if you could hold your hand, and I'll be calling out so that Carolyn can record, and for those in favour and those against, if it comes to that. Hopefully we won't. And just to let people who are looking in on our meeting know that some of our elected members use their devices for reading the agendas. So if you see a phone or an iPad, that's actually what our councillors are using for their modus operandi. So that's just to cover that off. I think, and also a reminder, councillors, with your microphones, if they can all be on mute when we're not speaking, that's very helpful. It's also a little visual cue for me. If you do wish to speak, you'll need to hold your hand up, but also if you take away that little mute, but if you go unmute, I can sometimes see that as well. You can appreciate there are a goodly number of people in the space, and it's not as easy to see around the room as it is in our council chamber. And also just a reminder that if there are any items for which you have an interest, if you could declare that at the beginning of the item, that would be really helpful. We are all present, so there are no apologies today. And being a virtual meeting, we don't have a public forum. And just before we get to item 5.1, the submitter was going to be speaking on their submission to the representation review, but they have chosen just to have it on our agenda but not speak to it. So we won't be having the submitter attend our meeting today, but it is a matter of record in our agendas. So I will move to item 6.1. I'll just double check with our support team. Is there any need for any resolution around item 5.1 for that submission? I'm pretty sure I remember that I didn't have to do anything. Can I have that confirmed, please?
No, the minutes will just record that the submitter decided not to comment further on her written submission.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate that. So we'll move to item 6.1, which are the minutes from our meeting held on Thursday, the 22nd of July. They're page 10 of our agenda. Can I have somebody move that they're a true and correct record of the proceedings of that meeting? Thank you. Councillor Peters has moved. Councillor Cocorella is seconding. Are there any amendments or corrections required?
Your Worship, are they moving that the minutes, including the confidential minutes?
Are the mover and seconder happy with that? Councillor Peters is indicating yes, and Councillor Cocorillo also. Thank you, Carolyn. So that is the minutes, including the confidential section. It's been moved that they're a true and correct record. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried unanimously. Item 6.2, the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday, the 13th of July. Page 16 of our agenda. Councillor Cocorillo is moving that they're a true and correct record. Councillor Cooper is seconding, and he's frozen. Are there any corrections required? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried. Item 6.3, the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday, the 17th of August. Page 20 of our agenda. Can I have somebody move that they're a true and correct? Councillor Cocorillo is moving. Councillor Reid is seconding. Any corrections required? Not. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried. Thank you. Brings us to item 7.2, the Norfolk Avenue Riotahi Reserve classification. It's on page 26 of our agenda. And I'll read the recommendations. I see you, Councillor Hulse, thank you. I'll read the recommendations. They are that the Council, 1, resolve to classify Part Lot 20 Deeds 863 as Local Purpose Access Reserve. 2, delegate to the Chief Executive the responsibility to provide notice of this classification to the Commissioner under Section 16 2B of the Reserves Act and undertake to provide notice of this classification in the Gazette. And 3, delegate to the Chief Executive the negotiation and approval of access easements across Part Lot 40 Deeds 863 and Lot 15 DP 58030 with the affected landowners. So Councillor Hulse was moving that. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Innes is seconding. Councillor Hulse, over to you.
I think, a landlocked situation we've got to resolve, and I think this is a very sensible way. We've had a fair bit of information provided to councillors, and I think this is the right way to go, so I fully support it. Thank you.
Sorry, any other debate? I think that Councillor Connop.
Just one question. This is 7.2. Have we jumped to that as opposed to the 7.1 exemptions?
Thank you, Councillor Connop. I probably have turned over a page too many, so we'll deal with 7.2 now and I'll go backwards. Thank you for that. Any further debate? I'll put that motion, those motions. Those in favour, please show of hands. That's everybody. That's carried unanimously. I will go back to item 7.1. Thank you, Councillor Connor. I'm sure our staff would have been in conniptions thinking, yikes, she's missed one. So 7.1, exemptions from council-controlled organisations, page 22 of the agenda. Where the recommendations are that the council resolves to exempt Springs Flat Contractors Limited as an organisation exempted under Section 7 of the Local Government Act 2002 for 3 years ending on the 25th of August 2024. 2, resolves to exempt Whangarei Waste Limited as an organisation exempted under Section 7 of the Local Government Act 2002 for 3 years ending on the 25th of August 2024. And 3, resolves to exempt Northland Event Centre Trust as an organisation exempted under Section 7 of the Local Government Act 2002 until the organisation has been wound up. Now, I'm noting that Councillor Hulse is probably indicating his declaration of interest in the Northland Event Centre Trust, and Councillor Martin will be noting his interest in Whangarei Waste Limited. And Councillor Benny also for the Event Centre Trust. So these are areas of appointments that council has made for those councillors to those organisations. So they're declaring their interest, but it doesn't prevent them from voting on this item. So do I have a mover for those 3 recommendations? Councillor Reid is moving and a seconder. Councillor Golightly is seconding. Councillor Reid, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see it mainly as good housekeeping, and this just keeps us in line with what's expected of us via the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Or hands, show of hands. That's carried unanimously. We've dealt with item 7.2. Now we'll try and keep to the sequence. Item 7.3, the lease to Whangarei Cruising Club, Kissing Point. There is a recommendation that the council approves the lease of 2,329 square metres, being part section SO 449132, including the land containing the clubhouse, to Whangarei Cruising Club for a further 10-year term and community use rental, currently $500 per annum. Councillor Connop has got something to add to that. Councillor Connop.
I just have a question on this. I was looking through the fees and charges that we set for 21-22, and what we have as set for the community fees and charges. Annual community / sports lease fee is $510. Is that for this specific fund? Because if it is, it's now raised since, well, I guess it's been 20 years since they've had this lease. But is that a modification that's needing to be done? Can I get clarification on that, please?
Thank you for that question. Can we have a response to that?
Your Worship, Sue Hodge here. Yes, if that's our current rental, I try not to let them go up by the CPI because they become an odd amount to be charging. But if we have increased that to 510, that is our current fees and charge then. That's what it will be.
Thank you. So the recommendation will be the rental currently $510 per annum. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Cooper is moving. And a seconder, Councillor Peters. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move this motion. It makes sense. They have a good history, and the club is strong, as reported to us in the papers. So, you know, pretty straightforward business as usual. No reason why not, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Peters.
I support this. The cruising club also have been supportive of Wakaama, and often they use those club rooms. So they have coexisted really helpfully with all the community paddlers and also competitive paddlers that use Kissing Point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please show your hands. That's everybody. That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 7.4, recommendation for increase in contract value of contract CON 17085, Whangarei North Road Maintenance and Renewals. The recommendation is that the council approves the contract value for CON 17085 Whangarei North Road Maintenance and Renewals contract to be increased by the sum of $11,886,500 and the total contract value increased to $48,887,000. Gosh, now that's $207.36. Yes, I've got my head around it, exclusive of GST. Do I have somebody move that recommendation, please? Councillor Connop is moving. Councillor Martin is seconding. Councillor Connop. You're on mute.
Thank you very much. I just realised. It's one of those things as well. It's just kind of continuing on business as usual. It's the contractors being extended, although the final piece seems a large amount of money. It's adding that new total to it. So it's we need to get these roads sorted out. It's one of the biggest complaints we always hear about. So yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Connaught. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Can I ask Councillor Martin, as the head of the infrastructure, if he is happy with the level of service that we've been getting from this contract and the state of the roads that they've been delivering? Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, I think it's probably appropriate that when Councillor Martin speaks to the item, he could cover that. That's more of an operational question for our staff, but I'm happy for Councillor Martin to address that if he chooses to speak to the item.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, well, that question's appropriate for our roading staff, but the roads in the north are not good. And we can do whatever we like and complain about the contractor, but if we don't give the contractors enough money to carry out the work that needs to be done, then we're unable to achieve what our people need. We definitely need to be putting more money into the roading. It just seems to be a bottomless pit that we just have to keep funding. And we need to keep pressuring government to continue funding us at a sustainable level so we can maintain the assets we've got. Councillor Connaught's dead right. I get calls all the time, regularly all the time, about significant things that are not done. The contractors respond as quickly as they can, but if we don't fund major upgrades on our roads, we're going to be in real serious trouble. And it's not just our own local roads. Anybody who's driven up Manu Road to the hospital will see the shops outside that's a state highway maintained by the government, and it is a nightmare driving through there. And I could list 1,000 others, but we definitely need to keep going, and we need to encourage our contractors to do it, but we need to fund the work that needs to be done. Councillor Cooper's quite right.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Just a question. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money, and like other councillors have said, it's critical work. But I'm just wondering, in previous years, I think our roading staff have actually come to council and given us a bit of a report just on, what's working well in the contract, areas of strength, areas that need improvement, and just spoken to this type of contract before we have signed it off. So I'm just wondering, was this due to the COVID situation? We haven't had this update first. Just for this large amount of money, I would have liked a bit more detail in the agenda report. Any comments from staff?
Through the chair, Calvin here. Yes, that there is a year-end report coming to Infrastructure Committee in September. So that is summarising the activities of the last year of the contract. With respect to this paper in particular, it's not a contract extension as such. The existing contract is already awarded through to the end of June 2022. This in effect is because of the record expenditure last year. A large portion of that expenditure, whether it be MB money or storm damage or seal extensions, to enable it to be facilitated and worked through, we use the maintenance contracts as the mechanism to get the work done. By doing that, that increased the value that went through the maintenance contracts, noting for the MB ones, half of the money that went to the contractors was actually passed through to local contractors. So while it was given to the contractor, it wasn't necessarily kept by the contractor. So in this case, the extra money is because as a result of doing extra work through the maintenance contracts to get things moving. And all of this money is existing budgeted funds. So it's not additional 12 million that's being asked for, or sorry, it's the additional it's the money that's already been expended under previous budgets. This is how much is required to continue to do the work through the remainder of the current maintenance contract period.
Thanks for that clarification, Kelvin. Any further discussion? This is one of those scenario, councillors, where we set, when we approve an amount for a budget to be spent, through our accounting mechanism, once that amount has been allocated, and as Kelvin's explained, some of this work was additional to the contract through the MB work, storm seal extensions, and we're ensuring that we've got sufficient in the budget for the annual maintenance works to be carried out in the coming year around maintenance, rehab and reseals, so plus seal extensions. So we do need to just allocate this for our accounting system to be able to pay for the work that will be done. Councillor Cooper, did you want to write a reply?
It was me, but
I beg your pardon, Councillor Connaught.
That's all good.
I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Hold your hands. Show hands. And those against? Is that an against, Councillor Murphy? Carried. Item 7.5, the temporary road closure, Whangarei Christmas Parade 2021. I'm not surprised to see Councillor Cockerillo's hand up. The recommendations are that Whangarei District Council 1 approves the proposal to temporarily close the following roads to ordinary traffic for the Whangarei Christmas Parade on the following date in accordance with the Transport Vehicular Traffic Road Closure Regulations 1965. Goodness gracious. Railway Road, full closure from Woods Road to Rail Station 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. for parade vehicular assembly. Wood Road, Albert Street, rolling closure from intersection to Clyde Street, Cameron Street intersection. Clyde Street, the restricted speed limit from Tony's Tyres to Albert Street intersection to enable walking entries, assembly, then join parade. Cameron Street, rolling closure, Cameron Street over Walton Street intersection to the mall. James Street, full closure from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. for finishing Christmas parade. The roads indicated with green arrows on the attached map will be a rolling parade. Traffic management approval for these will be managed through the Whangarei District Council Roading Department. And 2, that delegates to the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee and General Manager Infrastructure the power to give public notice to these proposed temporary closures, to consider any objections and to either approve, cancel or amend any or all of the temporary road closures if applicable. The date is the 27th of November 2021, and I think that should be in that on the following date. Can we insert the 27th of November into that recommendation? Are you happy with that, Councillor Cockerillo?
Absolutely, that's exactly what I was going to move. Okay,
and Councillor Peters is seconding that, and let's hope COVID allows us to go ahead. Councillor Cockerillo.
Your Worship, you've actually highlighted it specifically. Hopefully COVID levels will drop, allowing us to actually have the Christmas parade. It is, again, something that does happen in Whangarei, and the residents of Whangarei actually really enjoy it. The last year, there was a really good turnout. The businesses were right behind it. So it's one of those events that the Whangarei District really loves to have. It is a pity, and I'm not too sure whether the Kamo or the Onorahi Christmas parades are going ahead again. And looking at Councillor Connaught, they're not. So possibly that is, again, the reasons why we're doing it within the city. And again, I do say the teams that get behind it, the Lions, the Rotary clubs, the different organisations, it's a real worth event. And maybe as a suggestion, maybe council staff or councillors might want to actually create their own float for the parade as well.
Thank you, Councillor Cockerillo. Councillor Peters.
Hooray! I hope it happens.
Councillor Connaught.
Yes, I'll throw the motion as well, even though I didn't manage to get the seconding of it or putting it forward. No, it is. Last year was a fantastic event. It was amazing the amount of people that turned out to it. It was fantastic. It has been unfortunate that Onarahi and Kamo have had to change their ways. Hopefully we'll be able to, within the Onarahi space, be able to do another type of an event, but we've been trying to push people towards this central city parade for a little while. I've been wanting it for a while, so it's great to see that it's now a recurring event, and it's great to be able to see happening. So I'm hoping as well, very much so, that COVID is past, or at least allows us to interact. But yes.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. Anybody else wishing to spread some early Christmas cheer? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. And the Grinch did not steal Christmas. That's carried unanimously. Item 7.6, the development of 8 to 10 Dent Street. Councillor Cutforth, I think, has an alternate recommendation that she'd like to move. Councillor Cutforth.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I'd like to move the following. Delete 1 on our, do you want me to read? Would it help to read if I read it?
What I really need is just for you to read out what you are going to move.
Okay, I'd like to move basically that the recommendation is that we approve the marketing of the properties at 8 and 10 Dent Street, and calls for expressions of interest to develop the sites.
Thank you. So, councillors, just to highlight that this was in our agenda as item 3, but the wording has changed slightly so approves the marketing of the properties at 8 and 10 Dent Street and calls for expressions of interest to develop the sites. So hopefully that's clear. Councillor Cutforth has moved that. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Peters is seconding. Sorry, she's so quick with the hand up, I didn't see the other councillors. Councillor Cutforth, over to you.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just for councillors' edification, just to have a little think about, I was thinking about the recommendations yesterday afternoon, actually. And recommendation 1 on our current agenda, which is to authorise the staff to continue to prepare the sites for potential hotel development, actually cuts across what the tenor of the report says, which is really a broader approach to the site, which more reflects the decision in 2012 to develop the potential to develop it for tourism, visitor, hotel and accommodation. So, and that's reflected, I guess, in the what's in the current terms of expression of interest, where the preferred use is to be visitor accommodation or medium density residential. So taking out recommendation 1 really just opens it up slightly. The second recommendation, which was to put money aside for reinvestment, is superfluous if we're looking at that site being marketed as it is, not having to pay for demolition of the current buildings. So I'm moving recommendations so that the sites can be marketed both together and separately. And the reason for doing that is, I think, in terms of council, it opens up more possible options, and it also opens up the possibility of a better return on investment for council if the 2 sites are marketed both separately and together. So you may have a much better return than if we market the whole shebang as one. I think also, just in general, this recommendation is more reflective of the range of views around the council table in terms of the future use of that site. I think if you look at actually what the property development committees was the recommendation that one of the consultants put to the property development committee about the use of that site, it was potentially for high-end residential and apartments. So I think just opening up the options a bit more, which is what the original recommendation 3 was doing anyway, just allows more opportunity for a range of options to come back to council for us to make the decision. So that's why I'm asking councillors to go with both marketing the site separately and together, but also looking at a more broader expressions of interest to develop the site. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cutforth. Rob or Tony, I just wonder if you could give some guidance on how that would impact the, if this decision is agreed, what our next steps would be. I'd appreciate just some guidance for us for that.
Through the chair, what I would say is, unless we set some kind of criteria at this stage around what our expression of interest is likely to be, what we actually want to develop on those sites, and it's some kind of time frame we're working to, I can well see us being back here again in 9 months, considering what those options may be, and potential developers having walked away from the site. I don't think there's anything in those criteria which would prevent anybody coming back and saying we want to develop one or other or both of the sites. But I think what we really need to do is make sure that whoever's developing this or wants to develop it or express an interest in developing it can do so in a timely manner and has that track record and some capital behind them to make the development happen within the next 12 months.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Cutforth, in the original recommendations, it had some bullet points below it talked about the terms of an expression of interest being, and there are 5 bullet points. Apart from the bullet point that says the properties be marketed as a whole, I think that would be the one that would be mutually exclusive from what you're recommending. Would you be prepared to include those the other 4 bullet points in the expression of interest? That gives the indication that that with, as Tony has pointed out, timeframes and developer potential, etc. Would you be prepared to include those in your? Oh, and do we have a seconder for the? We did, didn't we?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm comfortable with that. I was starting to think it was getting a bit fiddly if I started taking, putting in the terms of the expressions of interest and then taking one out. But I'm comfortable with that, though. I would have thought, rather than it being in the recommendation, that those would be things that staff would be taking into account when they assessed the expressions of interest anyway. I'm comfortable with that.
I think we need to set a very clear direction by councils, by resolution. From my perspective, I would imagine as a staff member, they would want to have those criteria set. So I'll come back to you to see if you're happy to include that. I see Councillor Martin wishes to speak.
Yeah. I would like to move an amendment that we go with what's written in the agenda. I think it's very important.
Councillor Martin, so you're moving an amendment as originally in the
originally written in the agenda.
And Councillor Reid was seconding that. Councillor Martin, speaking to the amendment.
Yeah, well, we've gone out to the public in plans and in our district plan and all sorts of things that this site was for a hotel, was ideal for a hotel, and we've seen heaps of people coming in. It's been the preferred option. This still leaves everything open, and we've been through this discussion heaps of times, and this keeps cropping up. I believe that we need to do what's written in the agenda, progress it for the benefit of our district.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Cockerillo.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. I was just going to ask a question. My understanding was this property was actually subdivided the boundaries were actually redone. So there was actually one property, not 2. Is that still correct, or has that been reversed?
Can we check the status of that, please, Tony?
Yeah, through her worship, subdivision has been approved, but it hasn't been issued, so it can be let to lie, in which case it would be surrendered over time. It could be formally surrendered, or it could be section 223 and be approved in reality. So it's got no real bearing on this matter one way or another.
Thanks for that. Councillor Cutforth.
I just have a question, Your Worship. How does recommendation 1 in the original agenda, which is to prepare the site for a potential hotel development, reconcile with the terms of the expressions of interest, which state that the preferred use be a visitor accommodation or medium density residential? That was my reason for taking out recommendation 1, so that it does allow for the what's reflected in the expressions of interest. Staff may be able to answer that. Thank you.
My interpretation would be they're not mutually exclusive, but Tony, if you could clarify that for us.
Through Her Worship, yes, Councillor Cuthbert is correct. We could remove the first clause about prepare a site for a potential hotel development, and keep the clause 3 and the conditions around the expression of interest, and that would probably still satisfy the outcome we're trying to get.
Thank you.
Councillor Benny, then Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, Councillor Cutforth highlighted pretty much what I was going to say, the same thing. So recommendation 2, the 150K to cover additional costs, is that the removal of the childcare centre, or is it something else? What other work is required if we went with recommendation 3?
Through Your Worship. We at this stage we don't know what development or preparation would be required until we receive the expressions of interest, and it would probably be dependent on what the nature of the development was, what if any of that money would be required. I guess it's just prudent to make sure that we've got budget there if we need to do anything, and that we can continue to make sure that this development, whatever it may be, happens in the very near future.
Okay. I think that covers it. Yeah, it's just a little bit confusing for me with 1, 2, and 3 together. I agree with Councillor Cutforth in a way. Yeah, it's the potential hotel development, and then going out and with item 3, saying it's residential and that as well, I think is a little bit confusing.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Yeah, I support Councillor Cutforth's motion. We've had lots of debate about this at council, and we all have really different views. I agree we don't need to have in there prepare the sites. To me, that sounds as if we are, part of that would be demolishing the Armand Court flats. Council has been through the Armand Court flats, and they are a beautiful example of older style buildings in our city. They've got a lot of character. They are built so well, they're so solid. They do need some work to bring them up to standard, but when we walk through, you just don't have buildings of that quality anymore. They've got solid native hardwood floors. They've got solid hardwood doors and beautiful solid fixtures and finishings. There's something that really quite special. I think there's definitely space around them to develop, whether it's more medium density housing. But to me, I just think it would be morally wrong to go ahead and demolish those flats when we are in a housing crisis. Sure, they do need a little bit of investment to bring them up, to make them pleasant to live in again as far as bathrooms and kitchens. But I certainly see that a hotel development could be built where the childcare centre was taken away. So I support Councillor Cutforth's motion. I think it keeps it more open, and we can kind of, I think it's important to keep options open at this stage to see what else can come out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Connop.
Yeah, I support the original motion. Having the specific of a hotel development in there does limit it potentially, but also risks, just by their writing as well, to me, it risks the fact that we could potentially lose the more likely to lose the flats as they are. Even just I've recently traveled around New Zealand up the way, and there's been so many buildings that they've been repurposed as different styles of things where they keep the original features, but they're able to change it up to a different purpose. I definitely see that as an opportunity as well, whether it be for housing, whether it be a hotel development, one way or the other. It would be great to see the site used, but also protect the history that we actually have there as well. It may not be one of the oldest places we have around, but it is a place that's in the CBD, easily accessible, is a point of history for us around now. And everything going too modern, you lose all that character that we have all around the place. Even with a lot of stuff that I've been seeing recently with all the new modern development, everything's quite square and everything's blocky and everything's there's nothing. It looks fine, but it loses the character of what we actually have. And whilst we have those sites that we need to be able to use and invest in a manner of speaking, I'd like to see the flats protected as much as possible, but it's one of those areas that people will see what they will see in it. And but I don't see an issue with removing the first two, because I mean, in the grand scheme of what council does, 150k is small compared to what we approve in other locations. So that would be a easy enough fix. And removing the first one, it just adds it down into the base of the third, which is basically just kind of opening it up for more options.
Thank you, Councillor Connop. I've got Councillors Cockerillo, then Peters, then Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to ask a question. Haven't we already approved the demolishing of 8 to 10 Dent Street?
I know that item is lying on the table.
Sorry, Your Worship, I thought it actually got approved and then we had to rescind it. So my apologies about that. In that note, I'd just like to say I actually, with Councillor Martin on this one, I think there's nothing wrong with the way the staff have worded the motion. More to the fact that people have talked about the historic nature of this building. I just need to highlight that the building requires at least $1 million worth of work to be done to it, to be brought it up to code. And that is a hell of a lot of money in today's terms for building a brand new building, when you can actually make a lot more better use of construction materials. There we have had people make presentations about how they can utilise the site, how they can change for flats and things like that. But at the end of the day, Whangarei is in desperate need of hotel development, and one of the best areas that you could possibly use is that site for development. And I can't see why we wouldn't do that or wouldn't encourage that for a developer to come along. While I understand when people talk about historic nature and seeing the loss of historical stuff happening in Whangarei, this building is not of historical significance. It has been highlighted as not of historical significance. And at this present moment, us leaving the flats as they presently are really does concern me when I have businesses around the area telling me how people are squatting there, how people are pitching tents there, how the staff they regularly see come up and removing rubbish from the site because people are just not treating the site with respect. So in my view, the best option we could possibly do is clear the site, get the site ready for a developer so that it can actually be developed. Because the last thing we want to do is have more rubbish happening around our city and encouraging more people to just not look after it. Again, I'm hearing from the business people, and they are really concerned that this place has been left to ruin while people are just mistreating the area.
Thank you, Councillor Cockerillo. Councillor Peters.
I support the original motion put by Councillor Cutforth. The reason for my doing so is that I think that we need to look at development in a whole. Yes, we need a hotel, and that is why I support Uruku. And I think that has great potential to support our city. We also need to keep open the options for this site. And Councillor Cutford's proposed changes do that. I also acknowledge what Tony Collins said, that we do need to act. We need to actually get to a stage where we're doing something.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Worship. Just to follow on from Councillor Peters there, and picking up really on Tony Collins's comments, I think that we need to create a situation of certainty and direction. And when I have a look at the recommendations there, I align really with what Councillor Martin is suggesting, that there is certainty. So I feel that we could take out the first recommendation there and leave 2 and 3, and it would still achieve what Councillor Martin is trying to achieve in direction. And I was wondering, Your Worship, whether the mover and seconder of the motion, the amendment, would agree to that amendment on what they're proposing. Because when you have a look at the criteria there, the third one in relation to expression of interest states that the flats will remain until there is a purchase agreement. And one option, of course, is to keep those flats potentially within a hotel development. But I see the need to have that 150,000 there to be able to undertake action. So I really want to see a more decisive approach to this, and I was wondering through you whether Councillor Martin and Councillor Reid would accept that amendment to what they're proposing.
Councillor Innes, you're really complicating things. I think that it's better to.
It's an easy matter, Your Worship.
Councillor Innes, I would like to just check that the mover and seconder of the amendment, is there any appetite to change what you've moved as an amendment?
Well, no, I'm not prepared to change it, because I believe we need to be firm on this, and you know, we don't usually just change.
Martin, sorry, I just need. We're just gonna. I'm going to hold it to just checking that you didn't want to change it. Councillor Deeming.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the amendment because I see nothing wrong with the original staff recommendation. I think it covers all the points. It leaves the field open for a hotel development, an accommodation apartment development, or a combination of the two. We do need to have budget in there in order to be able to kick off any development really quickly should we get a good offer for something that the council actually approves to be there. So I see, in my view, the original staff recommendation covers all the points that need to be covered. So that's where I'll be going.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Any further discussion on the amendment or the motion? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. By my reckoning, we've spent something like 9 years and 15 or 17 minutes going through this. We pay staff an awful lot of money to bring recommendations to us, and then we sit here and we bicker over a few words. Now, we're going to be a go-ahead council that wants to see our town go forward, or we're going to sit here and sit in the doldrums and argue about wording of recommendations. I just feel we're wasting a whole lot of time here. There's nothing in this recommendation here that favours one or the other. It simply ultimately gives our staff the ability to be nimble, make quicker decisions, and get on with the job. So do we want to progress this town and our council, or do we just want to sit here and stagnate in a bog? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Connor.
Just a question on that first one. What does that statement by the staff mean specifically? So it says to continue to prepare the sites for potential hotel development. What does that entitle? Obviously, they've said that there's some work that needs to be done in that area, but what does that specifically mean?
Tony, are you able to enlighten us on that one?
Through Her Worship, I guess what we're saying there is that if there's going to be taking the property to market through an expression of interest, there'll be a procurement process involved. There'll be work to be done to prepare that, how that's marketed, how we communicate that. There could be some of the work around the titles to be titled up, the development of possible heads of agreements with legal side. So it's just a range of things involved in probably the marketing process rather than anything physical on the ground.
Tony, can I just further to that check that if the original motion were carried, would that enable you to continue to do that work that you just spoke of without that in the resolution?
We would continue to do that. My biggest concern is if we go to market and we say we're going to trust the market to come back with a response based on that criteria, and then we get to the same issue at the end of the day where this is not about developing the site, this is about whether or not we retain the Armand Court flats. And these are two separate issues as far as I'm concerned. So do we want the market to decide what happens on the site and what we develop, or do we want to retain the Armand Court flats? And these are not the same issue.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor Martin?
Yes, I have two questions. If the site is prepared for a hotel, will that compromise any other development? That's my first question. Second question is, if the site is not prepared, will a hotel and apartments be disadvantaged from the tyranny of time?
Through Her Worship, I think to the first question, we really don't know whether it be disadvantaged or not from the hotel. By tyranny of time, I think we're fast having a private sector that's losing patience with a council who cannot commit to an option. There are opportunities out there, but sooner or later, we will need to take some opportunity on the site.
Now, Councillor Cutforth, before I go to you, I do need to check the status of your original motion and checking whether or not the bullet points, so including the terms of an expression of interest being the bullet points, excluding the second bullet point. Have I got that correct?
Yes, that's fine.
Just to be clear to everybody, the original motion is approves the marketing of the properties at 8 and 10 Dent Street and calls for expressions of interest to develop the sites, and it will include the terms of an expression of interest being the 4 bullet points excluding the properties to be marketed as a whole. Councillor Cutforth, are you speaking to the amendment?
No, I just had a question for Mr. Collins, I guess, following on from Councillor Martin's question. In terms of the current first recommendation to continue to prepare the site for hotel development, how does he reconcile that with the terms of the expressions of interest being the preferred use, being visitor accommodation or residential?
Through Her Worship, I think, as I said to Councillor Cuthbert earlier on, I could comfortably not have that first one. They possibly can be seen as irreconcilable, so it would work equally as well. I guess part of that answer would come down to, are the properties going to be marketed separately, or are they going to be marketed whole with the opportunity to be dealt with separately?
Thank you.
Any further questions or debate? Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it's been 9 years, and I support a lot of the comments that Councillor Reid is making, that there's always seemed to be an excuse not to progress this site. Every time it comes to council, we seem to be going round in circles and go back and we arrive at a no answer. And this is the agenda, and we can hear through our staff's comments there's a fair bit of frustration there, and we need to be certain on a few things. So therefore, we've been through the building. As a trained carpenter, someone who's built buildings, it's going to be a massive cost to do something with that building. I don't think council's in a position to put some more money into it. And so at the moment, I'd like to see what this expression of interest could pull in from the outside. And I think we need to be a bit definite on it. So therefore, I'm going to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Councillor Murphy, do you have a question? Or?
Yeah, just a question, because I haven't got Councillor Cutforth's motion in front of me. Just on what Tony Collins was just saying, the properties could be marketed together or separately. So I'm just, in Councillor Cutforth's motion, did it say 8 and 10 Dent Street? I
Yes.
can't remember. Could you just remind me? Yeah, so
Yes.
it has got them separately. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Your Worship. I share the frustration of Councillor Reid and Hulse. What we have here, either of the motions doesn't stop people putting in an expression of interest. The real decision comes when we get those expressions of interest. So, I fully agree. Let's move on this topic. Maybe it's too late to move a procedural motion, but anyway, hopefully we're getting there.
We are getting there, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, just a quick question. So regarding the recommendation 2 with the money, if we voted for Councillor Cutforth's recommendation and Tony Collins needed some money to develop the site and it's not there, we would have to go through a process again. So I'm just wondering about that. Could he? So I think this is what Councillor Ellis was trying to get at before, and that we allow that money to be there if needed. So I just see that I'm happy to vote for Councillor Cutforth's recommendation, but I just see that number 2 would be required for Tony Collins. So I'd just like a comment on that if I could.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. That's a question. Tony, are you able to answer that?
Yep, through Her Worship. It would make life easier if we knew we had the money committed there in the first instance. I'm sure we would find the money if it wasn't, but it just makes life a little bit simpler and clearer if we've got a budget we've already got it in place to use if we need it, and we may not need it.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Cutforth, a question?
I'd like to speak against Councillor Martin's motion, if I may.
Yes.
Just some of the comments that have been made about us being in the doldrums and la la la. I mean, I don't think anybody is wanting to hold up the decisions any further. We are wanting some progress and some action on the site, and my recommendation does not preclude that happening at all. It simply leaves open some wider options because there is such debate both around this table and in this community about the future of that site. It's not saying we want to stop things happening. We certainly all want to see some movement and some decisive action on that site, which is why we're quite comfortable with the things that are in the expression of interest. What we're not wanting, and why I'm disagreeing with Councillor Martin's recommendation and the first recommendation here, is any sort of predetermination that the site has to be a hotel development, when in fact the resolution from 2012 left a number of options open. So I don't think anybody's trying to hold this up at all. And in terms of the 150,000K, which I assume would be for the demolition of the flats, if in fact that was the decision, I would have thought that that would have been something that could be negotiated with any potential buyer in terms of the total price. So I would really urge people to vote against Councillor Martin's recommendation and truly look at recommendation 3 and the terms of the expression of interest and the comments that Mr. Collins is making, and support that as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Cutforth. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillors, before I put the amendment, I will be supporting the original motion. I don't think it's mutually exclusive to the outcome, and clearly the community has given us an indication that there are options for the site that we may not have considered if we'd gone ahead with the Millennium Coxthorne proposal if COVID hadn't gone the way then. So I guess I'm saying that the community has raised other options, and I think it's important for us to leave our options open, and which is why I support the original motion, because it doesn't exclude a hotel development, but it does give the opportunity for people to express interest in developing the site in a way that we may not have seen otherwise. So I'll be voting against the amendment, and if it's lost, then I'll support the original motion. So I'm going to put the amendment.
The division, please.
And the division has been called for the amendment. So councillors in support of the amendment, please raise your hands, and I'll be calling your names as I see them. Councillor Cockerillo, Councillor Martin, Councillor Hulse, Councillor Reid, Councillor Deeming. Have I got everybody? And those against the amendment, please hold your hands up. Councillor Cooper, Councillor Connop, Councillor Golightly, Councillor Peters, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Innes, Councillor Benny, Councillor Cutforth, and myself. Carolyn, can I just check, is that amendment lost?
The amendment is lost.
Thank you. I'll put the original motion. Those in favour, please show your hands. My screen has frozen. I'm sorry. I'm going to need some technical assistance here. My screen is back. Please, can you raise your hands, please? I'm sorry about that. I missed that. So the original motion, please. Councillor Peters looks like her screen is frozen. Councillor Reid's is frozen, and Councillor Cockerillo's is frozen. Oh dear.
Yeah. From Councillor Cooper speaking, I support the motion. Out.
Councillor Murphy supports the motion.
Councillor Peters support the motion.
Okay, I'm going to run down I'm seeing enough hands to show that it's carried. But I am highlighting that I now have serious technical issues. I'm going to suggest that we adjourn the meeting. I'm sorry about this, but I can't run a meeting when I can't see people's screens moving clearly. So I'm going to, just before I ask everybody to sign off and come back in, I'm going to ask our technical team if that's going to be a suitable solution to this.
At this stage, I would just do as recommended and call for a short break and see if we can't resolve this.
Your Worship, can I intervene? Can I suggest that you leave the meeting and rejoin it straight away?
Thank you, Alan. That's a good suggestion. However, I think we have been sitting for an hour, so it would be quite helpful for everybody to take a break. Can I suggest that we sign out of this and come back at 10:10? Can I just, yeah, I'm frozen again. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting and reconvene at 10:10. Thank you. Cutforth,
For.
Councillor Cockerillo,
Against.
Councillor Connop,
For.
Councillor Cooper,
For.
Councillor Cutforth,
For.
Councillor Deeming,
Sorry. For.
Councillor Golightly,
For.
Councillor Hulse,
There's a substantial motion at the end, isn't it? So I was for it.
Councillor Innes,
For.
Councillor Martin,
We have to vote for it so we can progress.
Councillor Murphy,
For.
Councillor Peters,
For.
Councillor Reid.
Not in favour of it, but I suppose we've got to progress. For.
And I'm in favour, so that is carried. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry about this technical stuff. It's very jerky. Brings us to item 8.1, the financial report for the month ending the 31st of July 2021. The recommendation is that Council notes the external net debt position and Treasury report as at the 31st of July 2021. Can I have somebody move that recommendation, please? Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing again, so I will move the recommendation. Can somebody second it for me, please?
Yeah, Councillor Martin, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Alan, did you want to highlight anything in the report?
Thank you, Worship. Just to note that this time of the year, because we are deep into the audit process, which started on Monday, we don't produce the report. That'll be out next month. So this really just outlining where we are with our closing debt position, which was very close to the original budget.
Which is unusual for us. Any discussion? And I'm sorry, team, perhaps using the hands up button will be helpful in this regard. Councillor Deeming.
Sorry, didn't mean to hit that button. Nothing to add to what our finance manager's already said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll take it there's no further discussion. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Can somebody on the technical team tell me that all hands are up? Thank you. Item 8.2, Capital Projects Report, June 2021. The recommendation on page 68 is that the Council notes the Capital Projects Report for the 12 months ending 30 June 2021. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Hulse, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Martin. Any discussion?
Yes, Your Worship, just recognise the tremendous amount of work we've done this year. The council staff have got through a lot of work, and contractors, and been very pleasing to see that we're actually running to our budgets and actually keeping up with the workload that we said to our ratepayers we're going to deliver this year. And I know it puts stress on the organisation, but when we collect the rates, it's very important we spend the rates on the purpose and intent that we set the rates on. So we've done well. Thank you.
Touche, Councillor Hulse. Councillor Cockerillo.
Thank you, Worship. The only statement I wanted to make about this is it was a very ambitious year that we put forward to say that we were going to spend 90 million on capital projects. I'm just quite conscious that the following year the contractors may not be able to deal with the amount of load that's going to be asked of them.
Thank you, Councillor Cockerillo. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Your Worship. A small note of caution. I'm like Councillor Hulse, pleased that we've met our capital budget, but we want to make sure we do it through achieving the jobs and the work program that's set out rather than just paying more for contracts. And there are some examples which worry of that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Martin?
Yes, well, the interesting thing is with all of the story about the water all around the country and the three waters, even though transportation is probably a critical thing, but it'd be interesting for the public to know that we're spending an awful lot of money. We're up at number 1 or 2 in the whole country for our waters, and it's really significant that we are upgrading our projects, and we've got a lot of capital projects, and our maintenance is going really well. So these capital projects that we're doing to keep ahead of the game, everybody should know that we are right up there with the best. So,
thank you, Councillor Martin. And a thumbs up from Councillor Hulse. This is any further discussion? Oh, and a thumbs up from Councillor Reid as well. Any further debate on the capital projects report? If not, I'll put that motion. Those in favour, please hold your hands up. And that is carried. Councillors, I believe that brings us to the end of the open portion of our meeting today. Thank you all for being here. I need a mover and seconder for moving into our confidential portion of the meeting. Councillor Cockerillo has his hand up and Councillor Martin is seconding. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Thank you to everybody for attending, and hopefully our members of the public have seen this and seeing the difficulties of internet and lockdown. So I'll just take a little break while we stop. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Just checking the earlier agenda item about the Northern Roading contract. I think my screen was lagging. I voted for, and you did question that. And I'm just wanting to make sure that my vote was recorded for the item, not against.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. That's good to clarify that. Yeah, it was behind. Thank you. So if Carolyn, you can note that for that item. So we'll stop recording for this open portion. I'll wait to see that or get confirmation.